Thank you.
Welcome.
So we talked about transportation on the ground. We talked about transportation in the air. I'm going to take you to space and talk to you about our spacecraft that's currently flying and orbiting the Earth using a new space propulsion technique called solar sailing. We'll talk a little bit about what solar sailing is, and then I'll talk to you about the story of light sail. And we'll eventually reach the surprise ending with pretty pictures. Okay, so I'm from the Planetary Society. The Planetary Society is the world's largest space interest group. We're a nonprofit based in Pasadena, California, but we have members in over 120 countries around the world. We do things like educating and engaging the public with space exploration, advocating for space exploration, and we also do innovative science and technology projects. And LightSail is by far our largest, so let's get into it a little bit, and we can go ahead and check out do some solar sailing. What's interesting about solar sailing is even though it only first happened successfully in 2010, the concept in some ways goes back to Johannes Kepler in the early 1600s in a letter to Galileo, no less, saying, "Provide ships or sails adapted to the heavenly breezes, and there will be some who will brave even that void." He was basing this on seeing comet tails and realizing the sun was pushing out tails of comets. Let's give you an introduction. We'll start with a very serious video to tell you about solar sailing. Although light does not have mass, it does carry momentum. It pushes on things. This is the principle behind solar sail spacecraft. Spacecraft pushed by light. I'm going to demonstrate this using this light and this solar sail spacecraft. Let me just get this thing turned on. All right. Okay. It may not actually be that hard a push. In fact, in the case of the LightSail solar sail spacecraft with 32 square meters of sail area, the force from the sunlight pushing on it is about the same as the force from a housefly sitting on my hand. Well, I mean an average housefly. This one's kind of big.
Hey, you tried getting to the gym on this schedule.
Sorry, Mr. Housefly.
That's Dr. Housefly, and even though it's a very light push, it's also a constant push, which means that the spacecraft can speed up over time.
That's a really good point, Mr. Housefly, Dr. Housefly, and the reason solar sailing could be such a powerful space propulsion technique.
All right, Dr. B, I better go. I teach this online astronomy course, and I am late. Bzzz.
For more about LightSail, visit us online.
All right, so that goofy guy and Dr. Housefly had the basic concepts of solar sailing. Light carries energy and momentum that can be transferred. So light is pushing on you right now, a lot more on me with the spotlights, but it's a tiny, tiny, tiny push. And other effects on Earth overwhelm it, even light dust currents. But this radiation pressure or light pressure becomes significant in the vacuum or near vacuum of space. It is indeed, as Kepler sort of guessed, radiation pressure, light pressure that pushes out the dust tails in comets. The ion tails are pushed out by the solar wind, which, just to confuse matters, solar sailing does not use the solar wind. It uses the pressure of light. The solar wind push is much, much tinier. And so if we go to space, we can use this solar radiation pressure to push on a spacecraft. If we have a small spacecraft, particularly with big shiny sails, then that light, the photons of light hit the sail, they bounce off, it doubles the momentum transfer, and you get this tiny push. And for light sail, it's about like the weight of a housefly in your hand. But what's significant is, one, you don't have to take any fuel, and you also get a constant acceleration. The sunlight just keeps pushing. So this is kind of my rule number one to understand what you do with solar sailing spacecraft. The acceleration of a solar sail spacecraft is proportional to area of your sail divided by mass. So if you make a really big sail or a little tiny spacecraft or some combination, you get the maximum acceleration. So why would you want to use solar sailing compared to, say, chemical propulsion, rockets, things like that? One, there's no fuel required, so you can just keep sailing around. It's a small push, but it's a constant push. This facilitates, this combination allows you to do some strange and interesting things with orbits, so-called non-Keplerian orbits. And that allows you to balance forces. For example, one application of solar sailing might be a solar weather monitoring spacecraft. Right now we have spacecraft that detect solar storms coming at us, but they're limited by a gravity balance point called the Lagrange point, L1, between the Earth and the Sun. If you have a solar sail with a constant acceleration, you can actually balance it closer to the Sun, giving more warning before solar storms hit and affect things like power grids and spacecraft orbiting the Earth. You can also conceptually use lasers or creative orbits with the Sun to get to very high speeds to explore the outer solar system, or even someday in the future do interstellar flight. But it also allows you to do missions, for example, where you encounter multiple asteroids, where you don't even have to choose, or you can change your mind along the way. So that's why we care. So the Planetary Society tried to fly the very first solar sail mission in 2005, Cosmos 1, and the rocket failed. So we ended up exploring the Barents Sea rather than space. This was a very large spacecraft with inflatable booms, 600 square meters sail area, 105 kilograms, so over 200 pounds. It was a significant bulk. What actually was the first solar sail mission was flown by the Japanese, the JAXA, their space agency, Icaros mission. It deployed from a mission headed to Venus called Akatsuki. It had free-flying cameras, it had all sorts of creative tech gizmos, and so this picture is an actual picture of it from a little lipstick-sized camera that separated just after they deployed the sail. It was spinning. It had some creative things like solar arrays built into it to generate electricity. It had creative folding, but it was 196 square meters and 307 kilograms. Well, this is relative to what I'm going to talk about. Our spacecraft is 5 kilograms. And remember, low mass is good. Meanwhile, what else was happening in the space world was the development of so-called CubeSats. These standardized spacecraft that were as small as 4 inches by 4 inches by 4 inches, or 10 centimeters on a side, forming a one unit CubeSat. And they became very popular. They're very popular, a lot of them flying now in Earth orbit, often by universities, also agencies around the world. But they lack the ability or much flexibility in going interplanetary. They lack a propulsion technique, and they're so small that the good news is you can piggyback on rockets launches that are headed, say, to other planets. The bad news is you either have to figure out a way to carry fuel or come up with a propulsion technique not involving fuel. One other thing that was happening was NASA tried a so-called drag sail. And in addition to using sails for propulsion, you can also use them in low Earth orbit to deorbit a spacecraft, use the atmospheric drag. And they flew NanoSail D2. It was 10 square meters, 4 kilograms, and it had a delayed deployment. It got stuck, but then it popped out the sail. But it didn't do anything more than pop out the sail. So we took a new direction in the Planetary Society. We decided to try to fly the first controlled solar sail in a CubeSat, in a small spacecraft, to hopefully open up the future of space propulsion for small spacecraft. So here's the nutshell of the light sail program. Our main goal has been to demonstrate controlled solar sailing in a